The key turned in the lock with a soft click, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times before, but today, it made my skin crawl. A laugh followed, light, melodic, and utterly out of place. It came from Sarah, my wife of 8 years, the woman who used to be my best friend, my partner, my everything. Her laughter rang through the hallway like wind chimes in a thunderstorm, pretty, but jarring, off-key against the storm brewing inside me. I stayed silent, holding the door just enough for her to walk in ahead of me. It had been 6 long months. Half a year of subtle changes, late-night shifts that didn't add up, muffled phone calls she'd end with a too-quick love you before slipping out of the room. Her perfume began to linger on her clothes longer than normal, and some nights she came home smelling like a cologne that wasn't mine. I asked. She deflected. I begged. She gaslit. I watched her smile fade in my presence and brighten in the glow of her phone screen. I followed her through the entryway. She still had her heels on, her coat hanging off one shoulder. "You won't believe what Jen said in the meeting today," she started, still laughing, still so comfortable. Then she saw it. Sarah stopped in the doorway to our bedroom like she'd walked into a wall. The laughter died in her throat instantly, cut off like a radio switch. Her eyes, once so full of spark and light, widened as if the air had been sucked from the room. Her hand flew to her mouth, a gasp escaping, not the theatrical kind. This was different. This was raw, primal, stunned. I stood behind her, quiet, watching her crumble. Laid out neatly across the bed was a collection of carefully chosen truths. Evidence I had gathered with the kind of patience that only heartbreak can teach a man. There were printed screenshots of text messages and late-night emails, affectionate, reckless, damning. I'd framed them like they were works of art. Sitting beside them was the silk scarf she once said she'd lost, folded delicately, still smelling faintly of her perfume and someone else's cologne. I found it in the glove compartment of Kyle's car. Kyle, her work friend. The same Kyle whose name she barely mentioned until it began appearing everywhere. I didn't stop there. There was the receipt for the secluded mountain cabin, romantic, rustic, 2 nights booked under her name. She told me she was with her sick mother that weekend. But her mother had been at a church retreat. I checked. And finally, mounted above everything else like the crown jewel of betrayal, was the photo. Blown up to nearly poster size. Caught by a private investigator I never wanted to hire but eventually did, taken outside a candlelit restaurant downtown. Sarah's hand was in Kyle's. Their faces were turned toward each other, just barely blurred by the night air, but their closeness told the whole story. She took a step back, stumbling into the doorframe. "Matt. I can explain." I met her eyes, and for a second, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with. But that version of her didn't exist anymore. "Explain what, Sarah?" I said, my voice eerily calm. "Explain how you kissed me goodbye each morning knowing you'd spend your night in someone else's arms. Explain how you built this lie brick by brick while I was busy building a life for us." She tried to speak, but nothing came out. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, terrified, ashamed. I waited for the tears. They came. She clutched her chest, like the truth physically hurt. "Where is he?" I asked. Her mouth trembled. His at work." I almost smiled. "Work, huh? That's interesting. Because I just got off the phone with his wife, Lauren. Apparently, Kyle called in sick today. Strange coincidence, don't you think?" Sarah's face twisted with shock. She didn't know I'd found Lauren. She didn't know Kyle was married, or maybe she did and didn't care. But I cared. Enough to share the pain. Misery loves company, they say. I pulled out my phone and dialed. "Kyle," I said as he answered, my voice ice cold. "You might want to come over. There's something you need to see." 30 minutes later, Kyle walked into our house like he owned it. That stupid confidence evaporated the second his eyes landed on the bed. His gaze shifted to Sarah, who stood trembling beside the evidence of their affair. His jaw clenched. His entire world began to fracture right there in front of me. Lauren arrived not long after. She was quiet, composed until she saw the photo. Then her hand flew to her lips, just like Sarah's had. And then came the storm. Tears, screams, Accusations that made the walls shake. Sarah begged for forgiveness. Kyle swore it didn't mean anything. But the damage was done. When the dust settled, we stood in silence. The kind that feels like drowning. Sarah looked at me with red, desperate eyes. Matt, please, we can fix this. I shook my head. There's nothing left to fix. I filed for divorce the next week. Sarah tried to spin the story, paint herself as a confused woman looking for love, but the evidence spoke louder than she ever could. And Kyle? He and Lauren didn't make it either. Whatever fantasy they'd built together burned down faster than they could explain it away. It was all destruction. All loss. But something about it felt right. Necessary. Like the rot had finally been cut out. I sold the house eventually. Too many ghosts. I moved to Denver, started over. It wasn't easy. For a while, I carried the memory of that bedroom like a weight on my chest. But time moved on, and so did I. Then one rainy Tuesday, in a quiet corner coffee shop, I heard a laugh. I knew it immediately. I looked up and there she was, Sarah. Older now. A little more tired, with lines around her eyes and a sadness tucked into the corners of her smile. Our eyes met. Her expression shifted: recognition, regret, guilt. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. I simply closed my book, stood up, and left. I walked back out into the rain, not bitter, not angry. Just free.